Have you ever had a dream that felt so real it shook you to your core? A dream that made you question everything you thought you knew? Well, let me tell you about a man named Arthur Vance. Arthur wasn't just successful, he was the king of his own concrete jungle. Skyscrapers bore his name, his portfolio was the envy of Wall Street, and his life was a whirlwind of exclusive parties, luxury yachts, and fleeting pleasures. He believed in one thing and one thing only, himself. The world was his oyster, and he was the one holding the shucking knife. Faith, spirituality, the afterlife. To Arthur, these were just stories for the weak, fairy tales people told themselves to get through the night. His philosophy was simple: you live, you make as much money as you can, and then you're gone. The end, but one night, something shifted. After a lavish gala where he'd closed another 9-figure deal, Arthur went to sleep in his penthouse, high above the sleeping city. And he dreamed. But this was no ordinary dream. He wasn't on a yacht or in a boardroom. He was standing in a vast, empty space, a profound silence pressing in on him. Before him was a brilliant, blinding light, so pure and powerful it made the sun look like a dim candle. He couldn't see a face, but he felt a presence and intelligence so immense, so ancient, that his own ego, once the size of a skyscraper, shrank to a single grain of sand. He knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that he was standing before his creator. There was no anger, no booming voice of condemnation. There was just a question. It wasn't spoken in words, but resonated in his very soul. Arthur Vance, what did you do with the life I gave you? And suddenly, his life flashed before him. Not the highlights he would have chosen, not the magazine covers or the stock market victories. He saw the times he'd stepped on others to get ahead. He saw the charities he'd scoffed at, the employees he'd treated as mere cogs in his machine, the family he'd neglected in his relentless pursuit of more. He saw a life filled with things, but empty of love, compassion, and true connection. Every missed opportunity to show kindness, every moment he chose greed over grace, was laid bare. In the dream, a great book was opened, and his name was in it. But next to his name, the pages were filled not with his earthly achievements, but with a detailed account of his heart. He saw the pride, the selfishness, the indifference. He felt a weight of regret so heavy it threatened to crush him. He wanted to speak, to defend himself, to explain that he was a self-made man, but the words wouldn't come. In the face of this absolute truth, all his justifications, all his worldly logic, turned to dust. He realized with chilling clarity that his wealth, his status, his power, none of it mattered here. The only currency was love, and he was bankrupt. He felt a profound sense of loss, a terror not of punishment, but of separation, of having missed the entire point of his existence. Arthur shot up in bed, his heart hammering against his ribs, the silk sheet soaked with a cold sweat. The dream was gone, but the feeling, that overwhelming sense of judgment and regret, was branded onto his soul. The sun was rising, casting a golden glow over the city he once thought he owned. But he saw it differently now. He saw the millions of people waking up, each with their own struggles, their own hopes, their own souls. They weren't just numbers on a balance sheet anymore. They were people. He stumbled out of bed and walked to his vast, floor-to-ceiling window. The reflection that stared back wasn't the powerful tycoon he was used to seeing. It was a frightened man, a man who had been given a terrifying, beautiful glimpse behind the curtain of reality. That morning, Arthur Vance didn't call his broker. He didn't check the markets. He called his estranged sister, and for the first time in a decade, he didn't talk about business. He just asked, "How are you?" His voice cracked with an emotion he hadn't felt in years. He went to his office, but instead of demanding reports, he walked through the cubicles, learning the names of his employees, asking about their families, and truly listening to their answers. His executives were baffled. This wasn't the ruthless Arthur Vance they knew. This was a different man. He started a foundation, not for the tax breaks or the publicity, but with a genuine desire to help. He began funding homeless shelters, youth centers, and clean water projects, things he once would have dismissed as poor investments. His wealthy friends thought he'd lost his mind. "Arthur, what's gotten into you?" They'd ask over lunch at their exclusive clubs. Arthur would just smile. How could he explain it? How could he describe the dream? He'd say, "I just realized I was investing in the wrong portfolio." He began to read, to learn, to seek. He visited churches, synagogues, and temples, not looking for a religion to join, but for the truth he'd felt in his dream. He started praying, clumsily at first, but with a sincere heart. He was no longer building an empire of steel and glass, but an inner legacy of kindness and humility. He learned that true wealth wasn't about what you could accumulate for yourself, but what you could give to others. Arthur's transformation wasn't instantaneous, and it wasn't easy. Old habits die hard. There were days when the old, cynical Arthur would try to resurface, whispering that this was all foolishness. But then he would remember the dream, the blinding light, the silent question. The crushing weight of a life misspent, and that memory would be enough to set him back on his new path. He discovered a joy far deeper and more lasting than any business deal had ever given him, the joy of connecting with another human being, of easing someone's burden, of seeing a smile on a face he had helped. His life, once a frantic race to the top, became a steady, purposeful walk. Years passed. Arthur Vance was no longer on the cover of business magazines. His name was now whispered in community centers and charity boardrooms. He had given away most of his fortune, but he had never felt richer. One evening, sitting on a simple park bench watching the sunset, he felt a familiar peace. He knew his time was drawing near. But this time, there was no fear. He wasn't afraid of the end, because he had learned how to truly live. He had learned that every day is a chance to rewrite our story, to change our ways, to prepare for that final, all-important question. His dream of Judgment Day had been a terrifying gift, a wake-up call that allowed him to face his real judgment, not with a bankrupt soul, but with a heart full of a different kind of wealth. A wealth that never fades. So Arthur's story leaves us with a question for ourselves. We don't need to wait for a dramatic, supernatural dream. What if we lived each day as if our actions, our intentions, and our kindness were being recorded in that great book? What if we started building a legacy not of what we own, but of who we are and how we love? It's a powerful thought, isn't it? Thank you so much for joining me on this story today. If it resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Until next time, take care and live purposefully.